Guys, we're live. The Seattle Overload podcast, the Seahawks podcast, where we're going to look at organized team activities. We've kind of messed up, though, because I think today was possibly day 9, and then tomorrow, when we were initially planning to do the stream, is maybe the 10th and final OTA. So, oops. Griff has put himself off camera because he's eating fudge. Before that, we have a preamble. Chat, look at this. We're ready. We're ready to go.
Wow.
I always used to with my brother Griff, we used to argue about who got to push it down.
Yeah.
We'd compete over that.
It was pretty fun, right? 'Cause you go,
Right. Yeah.
Nice.
Did you ever have competitions like that with people?
With the French press?
Yeah.
Not in particular with the French press growing up. So you have a
Put
pretty
the press on over the French press.
Yeah. I used to be like who gets to do the honors over certain things growing up with my siblings, but I can't think of anything in particular like that.
You know what I've started doing?
What?
I've started, like, say I'm trying to think of an example of an activity which would be like this, but say I'm like tying my shoelace and it's taking me ages. I will say in my head, if I don't do it this time, you've lost.
I thought you were going somewhere else with that, a little more dark, but yeah.
Yeah, you're a loser, and yeah, and then that makes me do it.
Yeah. I'll do a countdown. It's like, oh, if you don't get there in time, you're gonna succumb.
Yes, yeah.
To put it euphemistically. Yeah.
Although the one problem is when you actually do mess that up, then it feels awful.
Yeah, because you know you're going to succumb any moment. It's just when
You've
the
hit
powers,
rock bottom.
some supernatural power decides it's your time. It's like, oh, it's because I didn't do that in time that one time.
Right.
Yeah. So, Maddie, did you watch Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World?
I haven't had time.
That's strange. You haven't had time the last 24 hours. Well, it's a great film. You'll feel very sophisticated having watched it. You'll be like, wow, what cinema. Even though it's very action-packed and, easy to follow in that way.
Okay. I'm sure.
Have you had escargot before? Mojambo's been wanting to know.
I have had escargot.
Nice.
It was on a school trip to France.
Nice. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I haven't ordered it since, and I've been to France many times since, where also it's been on the menu.
That probably answers the question right there then.
I just like, if we want a garlic, parsley, butter type flavor, why not just have that on bread or with something nice?
Too right.
Like chewy.
Yep. I've got baby birds in my front yard, right? I've got a nest going on. They hatched. Mama bird's been feeding them. It's great.
Oh.
But then also I saw a little fledgling on the ground just hopping around. And then it started chirping, waiting for mom or dad to come bring him some worms and bugs and stuff. But he's been making headway across my driveway. And it's just great. I just love nature so much when it brings a tear to your eye.
Anyway, you know what I was thinking of the other day?
What?
I realized what your name is. Like Griffin.
Yeah.
It's like, does that explain your obsession? Well, not obsession, but how much you enjoy watching eagles.
Maybe. I mean, but everyone likes looking at eagles and birds of prey.
But not everyone's called Griffin.
Okay,
you like lions as well?
I like lions. They're not my favorite big cat, but I like lions.
Yeah, see, that doesn't fit the name.
Yeah, that kind of your theory there is kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
Are you saying that my name, there was some poetic foreshadowing?
Yeah, or maybe, I mean, did your parents really like griffins?
My sister chose the name, actually. She saw it in the book, and she raised it.
Actually,
Yeah.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Sue, can I ask Griff, what's the coolest animal you've seen in real life? So not counting the zoo or not counting a sanctuary, the coolest animal I've seen in real life would probably be a porcupine.
Yes.
That was pretty cool. We know porcupines exist, right? But they don't exist in my mind. Like, I don't think of them as wild animals. I think of them as something you see in a picture book. You know what I mean? But of course they're wild, and I never thought that they lived around here, but they totally
They live in
do.
Washington State.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm on a hike. I'm like in middle school, I think. And in a salmonberry bush is this quilled thing, and I look at him like, that's a porcupine. And this was before cell phones were everywhere, and I probably would have had a cell phone, if I was in middle school today. Well, I had a cell phone in middle school, but I wasn't taking pictures with it left and right. Mm-hmm. Anyway. Yeah. So that's probably a porcupine. Although I'm more eager to see a bear. Every time you see a bear, it's like, well, that was sick.
Yeah. In the wild.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah. Porcupine's a great answer. I think I've seen porcupine.
Nice.
In America. Yeah.
You did? You saw one in America?
Yeah.
Wow.
But they don't exist in England.
Well, you've only been here so many times. You only have so much time on task in the States. What are the chances you'd see a porcupine while over here,
I'm pretty sure I've seen a peregrine falcon before.
Nice.
That's quite a cool thing to see, right?
Yeah, indeed. That's very cool.
But I think you call them do you call them falcons as well, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. Good
Love
preamble.
It. Boom, bang, hit it.
Axel, I was going to mention that, but I thought it wasn't very funny, so well done.
Wait, hold on. What's the origination of the name Matthew? Is it biblical?
Yeah, it's biblical, yeah.
So was Matthew a disciple? Gift of God. Wow. I mean, Matty, I think you're pretty great, but it's a little rich. I mean, that's got to be earned, right?
Yeah. No, I don't think Matthew is a disciple. No.
Okay.
Was Matthew a disciple? He was a disciple.
You know what? I'll grant it. You are a gift of God.
That's so messed up. I didn't even know that. Well, I did know that. I just forgotten that because, hey, we're all welcome in the chat, but I'm not that religious, so. Anyway.
Boom, bang, hit it.
It's 3:30 a.m. That was embarrassing that I got that wrong. I'm embarrassed. Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where Griffin and I have the Seahawks organized team activities roundup. Specifically, we're recording this on a Wednesday, June 5th. We're going to be talking mainly about comments made Monday, June 3rd. And right now, if the Seahawks continue their schedule, which they're on, which Monday, June 3rd was Seahawks organized team activity number 7, you have 10 of them. That would mean that Thursday, June 6th is the 10th and final OTA. Hope you've all got that down. Slightly confusing. But anyway, we've got comments from Ryan Grubb, Jay Harbaugh, and Aden Durde. The Seahawks coordinators, special teams, offense, and defense. And honestly, this staff, they're a new staff, but reading into what they said, they're revealing some stuff where now they're kind of settled in, shows that they're opening press conferences and all that things where you've only got so much time, only so many questions can be asked. But I think they were kind of feeling out their surroundings. They needed to get hands-on with certain players and see what they were like before they could make any sweeping proclamations or get too in-depth on stuff. But now they've had the chance to. They've been in Seattle a few months now. We're getting some real detail, and that's exciting. So we're going to have to talk about that. But first, Griff, very significant Seahawks news. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are signing former Seahawks wide receiver Cody Thompson, per Greg Orman of Fox Sports.
Yeah. There was a very short time period where I thought he was the answer, the tall slot prophecy.
Yeah.
For Russell Wilson. Yeah. But it didn't come to fruition.
Fruition's one of those words that I wanted to say fruition.
Fruition.
Which I guess
would
be like
sense.
a beautician who works with fruit. Anyway,
fruition.
Yeah, it didn't come to fruition. It was sad. He kind of a bit part player. He got banged up at a time where he couldn't really afford to get banged up in terms of how he was looking on the roster.
He was always making the 53 out of preseason, but then he would get hurt.
Which I think spoke to his special teams ability as well. I mean, he appeared in 11 games in 2021 and 13 games in 2023. He even had a catch last season as well. But yeah, he was kind of a player in the preseason that was interesting to look out for, wasn't he? But now he's almost... Well, the reason he's no longer a Seahawk is essentially they've got Jake Bobo in the building, and they've got Tariq Young, who also can play that kind of big slot role. So Cody Thompson no longer a Seattle Seahawk.
Yeah. In other words, it's over.
It's over. But not for Dave Canales. Wait, he's not in Tampa Bay.
Oh, wait.
Carolina Panthers head coach.
Yeah, we got Jake Bobo, so we're back.
Yeah, there you go. Very good. Right, so from the 7th day of OTAs, which is what the media was able to attend, there was news that Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, D. Eskridge, Laviska Shenault, Draymond Jones, and Cam Young weren't there. Buddha Jones also wasn't there, the defensive lineman. Dodson walked through stuff but didn't really practice, and Jerome Baker wasn't on the field. Also, Abe Lucas and Anthony Bradford were both out. So that saw Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jake Bobo, and Tariq Young as the top three wide outs. And then the offensive line was the same as it's all been, which is Charles Cross, Laken Tomlinson, Olu Oluwatimi, McClendon Curtis, and George Fant. That's all per Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times. Also, Kobe Bryant got some work at safety and nickel. So, I imagine some of those names will return to practice, or have returned to practice in the following days, but just stuff to monitor and note down. Now, comments-wise, Griff, who do you want to start with? Do you want to start with Grubb or Harbaugh?
Well, let's do
Dirty.
What do you want to do? What do you feel like? What do you feel like tonight?
Wow.
Italian, Chinese, Japanese, Mexican. What do you
we have the options of British or American.
Let's start with let's get the British out of the way. So let's do dirty.
Okay.
No, let's start with defense because defense is better than offense.
It is, yeah. So, dirty is interesting because something that has been passed by people who are at the press conference and others is that the defensive line is going to rotate more and they're going to put more bodies in on D-line and have different personnel groupings. Dirty said... when asked about utilizing defense, like players along the defensive line, so putting D-line in different spots, he said, I think that's what good defensive lines are. You look at the groups, and right now it's kind of hard because we can't go full gas, but it's what are people good at? What are their individual roles? How do they fit into the picture? What down and distance would they be good at, and where do they excel? I really believe up front it's about creating a way of playing that enhances people's abilities in certain situations. There's a couple of guys that really flourish in every situation, and there's other guys like Jonathan Hankins, or those guys that flourish in certain situations, and then how you rotate them. We've got so much versatility.
Right. I mean, how frequently you do or don't rotate is purely a function of how do you feel about your depth, right? I mean, that's what it is. The Seahawks have tremendous depth right now. They also have tremendous top line talent. Well, it can also, if you rotate a lot, it can also be it's about how you feel about your depth relative to your starters, is what it comes down to. The Ravens really only had one legit 3-down player, and that was Matabuike. Obviously, he's like a top 10 interior player, right? And he played 750 snaps, so he was a 2/3 snap player, 66% snap player. The Seahawks played. Go ahead.
Sorry to cut. Yeah, it's 65.43% of the snaps.
Yeah, and then Pierce, I'm looking at on PFR right now. He was 55, and then everyone else was like 40%, 40%, 30%, and then it's just because those guys are just role players.
Yeah, and then Clowney on the edge played 56.53% of the snaps, which was the most out of the edge group by a significant amount.
And I would say that actually feels a little low. So there is a philosophy of truly rotating the edges.
I think it's more that Clowney, you don't really want pass dropping so much in base situations.
Oh, sure.
And try and keep him fresh, but yeah.
Sure. And then also they had to play the big guy, Brent Urban, outside too. So that's going to cut into all of them. But looking at Seattle, I mean, I don't think Seattle wanted to play Jaron Reed. What did they play him? 800 snaps last year, but they kind of had to. Nwosu comes in and his snaps actually drop, or not Nwosu. Leonard Williams comes in and Jaron's snaps drop a little bit. But so with, Jaron Reed, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, I think there's going to be two guys at 700 snaps. And then, I think Murphy will probably play 500 his rookie year. So he probably won't have enough snaps to kind of be in the conversation for defensive rookie of the year just because of his volume stats won't be there. And that's what the voters look at, unfortunately. But, yeah, I mean, they've got so many body types. They have to get them all in there. So it's just, they're deep. They have good first string and a good second string. So, you have to rotate them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look at Seattle back in the Legion of Boom days. Not only did they line up people in different positions, like Michael Bennett would play 3 technique in a clear passing down situation, but on rundowns, he'd play, the 5 tech. He'd play some Leo as well, but he'd play like an edge or like a big edge type role. Not only did they move people around, but they also subbed pretty heavily. Like in the pass rush situation, their pass rush grouping was different. Even their nickel grouping and usage was different. Bruce Irvin would have been down on the edge in a lot of the base looks, but as that system, those players developed, thinking kind of 2014 onwards, he wasn't really getting into the first or second nickel rush rotations. You had Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett, so and you had Chris Clemens a bit earlier. But anyway, point being, I wouldn't read too much into this. It's just, I mean, we've spoke about the amount of bodies and depth that Seattle has now in this area, particularly, interior and exterior, if they can stay healthy. Well, then you have to find a way to get guys in the right spots at the right time and find a way to rotate them through and get them their snaps.
Mm-hmm.
That's just when Durde himself said, I think that's what good defensive lines are, that's exactly what he's meaning.
Yeah. Ultimately, when you rotate, you're taking snaps away from your best players. So you only want best players. You only want to do that if, I mean, when in 2013, like there wasn't a single guy on that line that played over 600 snaps. And then you lose Red Bryant in free agency, Brandon Meebane gets hurt, whatever. You lose Chris Clemens. And then Bennett and Averill's snap counts shoot up to 800. So it's just a function of they didn't philosophically decide, we're not going to rotate this year. It's just a response to your players. So,
yeah. So interestingly, when it came to versatility on the back end, Durde responded about how there's less room for error there. And right now it's about defining your job and understanding before you build on the versatility. understanding the checks, understanding how they align and the detail within that. And then once they've mastered that, that's when you can start the versatility aspect.
Right.
Which, I mean, makes a lot of sense. But I think down the line, and he highlighted Julian Love as a standout player in terms of his communication being excellent. Down the line, I think we see Love moved around a fair bit. Devon Witherspoon will be moved around a bit, but they have to master each of the techniques before you start really moving them around, especially the core techniques. Get good at one or two things, and then you can get good at everything. And you can plug and play different guys and find out where they fit best. Yeah, so that's it on versatility. Now, the other anything else you want to speak about, Dirty Griff? Because I have one more thing.
I think it's cool that he name dropped Julian Love in particular. Just probably having a really good camp and owning the defensive stuff. Communication obviously is a big piece of the puzzle, right? Pre-snap and post-snap. So, but go ahead.
Well, I've just seen actually, he said about Draymond Jones, he said, I think again his versatility, as you move him around, you can create matchups and things like that. But understanding on early downs where he fits and how he fits in the picture will be in the important part. That's kind of what we've been saying, and it actually could be the problem.
Yeah, I mean, is he versatile or is he a tweener at this point? I mean, I'm the best thing about Draymond Jones is when it's a pass down, he's rushing guards. That's always been the selling point for him ever since Ohio State. That's what he is. He's a B gap rusher. And that he's more than that, but that's like the flagship concept behind him, you know? But you can't rush the B gap if you're not playing in the B gap, and you can't play in the B gap on early downs if you can't defend the run, because they'll still throw the ball on 1st and 10, but they're just going to run it more frequently than they will on 2nd and whatever. So it's, I mean, or they still throw the ball on 2nd and short, but you see a lot of running on 2nd and short. So you're not going to be able to reap the benefits of his pass rush if he's not eclipsing a threshold of run defense in those situations to merit playing him in those situations. So yeah, it's probably a lot of, you know, base edge and the nickel stuff, a bigger body presence. If he actually has dropped weight, I mean, I'm curious to see what he can do as an actual edge rusher, kind of a speed to power guy. He had some of that last year. Toward the end, he was popping, and like he did in Denver too. But can that be his bread and butter? I don't know. We'll see. But the D-line is so deep that you're talking about an $18 million per year player that you can't really find snaps for. And it might be more of a frustration than like a perk, I think, as time goes on.
Well, yeah, and is the early down fit? Is he light enough that the early down fit's actually playing outside backer on the edge? Are you going to try and drop him into coverage? I mean, he complained about dropping into coverage in the past, or maybe didn't complain, but there was some grievances you felt there. And maybe that was how it's communicated to him before the season, but I don't know if he's ever... You don't want him to lose too much weight and not be able to work inside. I mean, I imagine the fit that they have envisioned for him is as actually in the base 3-4 stuff where you're going to have like an underfront. You're going to have him play outside shoulder of a tackle in the C gap, right? Like he did last year. But you can't ask him to 2-gap, which is what you'd kind of want him to do, or most guys to do. What McDonald's asked his guys to do in the past in the base front. So, yeah, that's kind of the early down thing. Is interesting that Durde mentioned that as well, because that's the problem we've been having.
Right.
So the final thing that I saw with Durde is... he mentioned how with Mike McDonald and the scheme, he said how when I came in, Mike had a very clear vision of what the system was. So obviously we know that the Mike McDonald mic'd up segment, they're using the Ravens or McDonald terms, fronts is all the same as it was in Baltimore.
Yeah.
But what Durde did say was how they're growing together as a staff, and that's been the fun thing, and he's learning every day. And he was, he's been leaning on Leslie Frazier as well in that sense. So I think what's encouraging with this is it's hardly a shocker that McDonald would take his defense to Seattle, but it's encouraging how similar each of the coaches is sounding in terms of how they're working together and growing together and what they're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. And when you refer to a coach's system or a coach's scheme, what actually happens on the field schematically can be a function of what areas in the playbook that you live in, right? So it can still 100% be the Baltimore system, but it could take on a different life in Seattle still in terms of process, because he might live in different areas of his playbook, as it relates to his personnel and opponents and everything. But yeah, that was an interesting comment from him. I mean, again, the system's the system. Of course, he has a clear idea about it, but how he operates within that system could be, we won't know until we see it, type of thing.
Right. So Durde's kind of not being asked as many questions as the offense coordinator, which happens, but then also he gets questions about, like, what soccer game did you watch? Did you watch the FA Cup or the Champions League final? Which, great.
Did you have thoughts about that?
Well, I watched both. Yeah. I don't know. It'd be nice if he was asked a question around D-line technique. Like,
yeah.
How similar is your ideas on coaching D-line technique to Coach McDonald, or,
Right. Yeah. Because he comes from the, obviously, the Carroll system. So a lot of the power stepping and mirror stepping particularities are going to look very similar.
Exactly.
You'd think, right?
The one gap and the two gap. And I think a big thing for why Durde was selected by Mike McDonald initially is how impressive that Dallas line was with their the way that they coached their guys to two gap and one gap at the same time. The kind of hybrid nature of the front, which McDonald is pretty hybrid with how he tries to do things, and obviously Carroll was too. So the other reason McDonald would have picked him, and it comes back to that point about utilizing players along the defensive line. Dallas in that system did a really good job of, getting Micah Parsons, getting Parsons in the right matchups for his skill set, because he is a 250-pound guy.
Yeah.
He's light.
But
they moved him around to get him the good matchups, and Hankins became that early down run stuffer, but they took him out of some bad spots when they needed to. So I think that all of this versatility stuff, and then all this other talk, the proof is in what Durde's done in his background, in his past.
Yep.
Monjombo asking, Matty, you wrote about how Baltimore's man coverage in the second half of 2023 dried up because opponents just had beaters. You also said cover one might fit Seattle's better DBs, weaker linebackers. Is fixing man in Seattle reliant more on better situational awareness or when to call it, or more dependent on individual player performance? Especially after, I think one of you mentioned in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs' man coverage limited Purdy, who didn't have accuracy to throw into them. Would be nice to follow that lead in the NFC West. Did you mention that about the man coverage? That's a very good callback, Monjombo.
I think I mentioned that, yeah. Because I was talking about how some of his impressive throws are very anticipatory throws, and he uses zone droppers as like landmarks on the field. And when there aren't zone droppers, that could be in part why
Right.
He's worse against man because I always feel like against man he throws behind. It's because it's like a mental thing. Like he doesn't know how to relate his throw to the receiver.
Because the defender's following it all the way rather than kind of stopping and then you're banging it inside of that window.
Yeah. Because timing's different in man coverage, right?
Interesting.
So yeah, maybe that's a really good point about Mujambo relating that to your man coverage regression article.
Yeah, and then this point about is fixing man in Seattle reliant more on better situational awareness when to call it or more dependent on individual player performance? I don't think it's a situational awareness deal. I think it's kind of just execution and then
execution and how you weave into the call.
Yes.
Like what look are you showing before and then the
presentation of it. Because Monjombo, I think one thing that I didn't say about the beaters, and but I kind of said it when I said that it had been sussed out, is their presentation of man was quite obvious. For defense, which is pretty good at disguising generally, it was quite obvious when they were in man. So I think there are ways they can better layer that, and as Griff said, weave that with the rest of their defense. But yeah, it's something to monitor. That's why I've read the article. Thanks, Monjombo. Good stuff.
Yeah, check that article out, folks. You'll learn stuff.
Thank you. Right, so to the offense, those evil bastards. Ryan Grubb, offensive coordinator, was talking, and he said a lot. Griff, you're coughing again. Are you okay?
Yeah, this time it's fudge-induced cough. It's not allergies
sweet,
or
sugary, sickly. Yeah.
I think I've got some hazelnut stuck in my throat.
Oh,
this region right here.
You're not allergic to hazelnuts?
God, I hope not. Yeah, this would be a terrible time to find out.
That would be, yeah.
Going into anaphylactic shock live on a podcast.
Hey, for the content, right?
Yep, anything for you guys.
I always get worried that I'm going to, because I don't have nuts that often, and I always get worried that, hey, what if this is the time that my body's decided it's allergic to nuts because I haven't had them in a while?
Right. Because you can become allergic to things over time randomly for no reason.
That's my point, yeah. Sometimes nuts seem to make my throat itch.
Interesting. Either you mention that to your doctor or you go, probably nothing. And just carry on with life.
Okay, Ryan Grubb. So there's a bit of coach speak in here.
Yeah.
But there's also some real stuff where he is open and voluntary and cool. And going from Shane Waldron to this, Shane Waldron gets a lot of stick, some of it misplaced. But stick for his press conferences. Oh my gosh.
Shane would give you absolutely nothing.
His press conferences were awful.
He would just smile and basically tell you to go to hell. He'd give some, he didn't want to give anything to anybody, which I appreciated where he's coming from, but it still made it very annoying.
The 2018 Rams playbook is out there in public. You could at least tell us some football rather than speaking in constant cliches.
Well, one thing that he said that both he and Canales say the same thing. They would talk about being firm in the pocket from their quarterbacks, having calm feet. That's clearly evident of what they coach the guys. The actual coaching, we would get more stuff from the actual coaching from Waldron than scheme. Yeah.
Which is, maybe there's an opportunity there to ask more about kind of individual techniques and stuff. But anyway. Right. So Grubb asked what traits he wants to see from his offense. He said, I think that grows and evolves every year, right? You base some of that on the talent that you have and the guys that you have here, so obvious stuff. But then he got into run-pass balance and saying about having the running backs like Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, and you're pretty excited about your ability to run the ball. And then he mentioned how we're trying to melt some things together with some of the things we've done in the past, whether it's a long time ago or even just the last few years, and get the guys to understand that we want to be a physical, dominant team at the same time, have that same explosive, confusing element that people are used to, which, I mean, that sounds very exciting. We're going to have to do another Ryan Grubb episode where we watch the Fresno State game, because we have them against Oregon, which is a high-level opponent, and he caused them serious issues with a fairly different defense. Mountain West versus Pac-12. I said fairly different defense, fairly different offense. Like, it's markedly, same concept, but the dressing up of it's different, and you've also got a different quarterback, and you got a different running back and all that type of stuff. So Griff, that's exciting, no?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, like, hearing him talk about balance. We know he's going to want to throw the ball, right? He's going to throw the ball a lot.
Well,
but then it means, what does balance actually mean, though?
Well,
balance
and
doesn't
also
necessarily mean 1-to-1 ratio.
Mike McDonald spoke about how they want to run the ball and be a physical team, Griff. So
it goes back to, Pete said the same things every single time. Then what does he do? The last 2 years, he's airing it out, pass heavy. So, I mean, Kyle, you ask Sean McVay the same question. He says it all starts with the run game. You ask Kyle Shanahan the same question. It all starts with the run game. And then yet they have two polar opposite pass rates. It doesn't mean anything in terms of the splits, the actual ratios. Because what balance actually is, and this is like what Pete is always saying, like if you read between the lines, what balance is the ability to impose constraints on the defense out of any formation. That's balance. It's not about the rule of 53. Pete knows that's a result measure. That's not process he's chasing. That's a result he's chasing. The process he's chasing is, if they're defending the pass, let's run the ball. If they're defending the run, let's pass it.
But enough about Pete Carroll.
Well, I'm saying that Grubb is probably going to. It's the same philosophy. Excuse me. It's the same philosophy, same approach. The run game was a compliment at UW. It was a productive compliment, but it was, okay, they're in a bad front. Let's beat the front. What beats an over front here? We're going to run gap scheme weak, and we're going to exploit the bubble, right? So.
Yeah. Or at UW, it was, oh my gosh, we've got these crazy ass receivers, and we've got so many one-on-ones out here. Can we start just hitting them?
Yeah.
Yes, we can, and we're going to keep doing it.
And Matty, Russell Crowe and Master Commander had a very balanced attack when he attacked the French frigate, the Akron.
Well, that's important. That's good to hear. Tim DeBoard asking, what run concepts do you think Grubb wants to major in? Inside zone.
Inside zone will be the bread and butter. That will be the flagship, stock play, right? Yeah. But he'll have a heavy gap scheme complement.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about the gap scheme stuff is data via SIS. But if you look at how Grubb's run game evolved, and it could just be a one thing sample size, but and obviously Dylan Johnson wasn't the Huskies back in 2022, was he? Or maybe he was. Huskies fans, I'm sure we have a few of you in here. You can correct me. But at Fresno State in 2021, Grubb was 21% gap concepts to 77% zone. Then in 2022, that was very similar. So when he joined the Huskies, they were, and Scott Huff was there, right? In 2022, they were 22% gap to 77% zone. So the gap went up by a percentage point. And there's a missing percentage there, which I guess SIS couldn't quite decide on. And then in 2023, the gap stuff went up to 40% gap to 60% zone. And obviously their rushing attempts went down overall. As, something to explore. Did he find something in how just defenses are structured? I mean, if you look across the NFL, the amount of over fronts and nickel looks and 4-down nickel looks.
Right. And
to Griff's point, how do you beat that? Well, you run gap weak. You run gap to the bubble and you cause real issues. Are we going to see Grubb take that into the NFL? And did he up the gap usage for a similar reason? Was there a similar motive behind it in his 2023 season? stuff I'm going to be looking out for.
Yeah, the main thing you think is front usage, but then you also wonder, do they RPO less? Because with RPOs, you're more frequently going to see inside zone attached to it. And if you feel the need to RPO less, you don't have the threat of the pass to buoy your running efficiency. So you compensate with that by throwing more complicated run concepts at defenses. I think in the NFL, he's definitely not going to RPO as much as he did in college. So therefore, he's going to want to get his run efficiency kind of back up, buoy that a little bit, compensate by being a little more diverse in the run game. So that could be cause for seeing a little more gap. I mean, it's still going to be mostly inside zone, but when the tight end is on the line, it's going to be gap strong. When tight end is off the line, it's going to be counter weak probably. Whatever the case may be. I am curious to see what the run game looks like when they're true spread, like 2x2, Noah Fant in the weak slot. That's when it's going to be like GT counter. And do we see like pin and fold inside zone? Stuff like that. Like what adjustments? I mean, if you're going to be a spread team, which they are, Waldron was spread with his personnel. Grubb was spread at UW with his personnel. He's going to be spread again in Seattle. You should just have the full bevy of micro adjustments within your zone and gap scheme when you go full spread. You got to use all of it. Like, why wouldn't you? Seattle had some of it for sure.
Yeah. And then to your point about stuff working in the NFL and maybe not working and whatnot, he said when asked if he feels there are things that he has to scrap because of that step up and it may be not working in the pros, he said, oh, sure. I mean, there's always stuff that maybe you got away with in one league that you can't in another. I mean, even in Mountain West to Pac-12, all those types of things I think absolutely are applicable. And you got to find the things that are realistic. So, the other stuff that Grubb
which I would say, not to cut you off, Matty, I think that's great that he mentioned that, because it's bringing back the idea that you can't copy paste UW to the NFL, but the UW offense as it was is not what makes Grubb great. What makes Grubb great is that he created an offense within the constraints of his league. So like that's what you're hiring. You're not hiring 22% of your pass attempts going 20 plus yards. That's not what you're hiring. You're hiring the guy that realized, oh, I can do that in this league with these players. What can I do in this league with these players over here? You know what I mean? So that said, DK O'Dunes, right? Tyler Polk, JSN McMillan, there just so happens to be like awesome parallels. So yeah, 80% of it is going to look identical to what Waldron did. But yeah.
Okay. So, where's I going? The quarterbacks. Yeah, so oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. In the opening presser, Grubb was kind of asked how it translates to the NFL. And I felt, well, it's just an opening presser and it's just the way the question was asked, but we didn't quite get the answer that maybe you'd have expected. But I think this answer is was kind of an upgrade on that. That was nice to hear. Now, the quarterbacks we heard so much more detail on, and the most Geno Smith praise that we've got so far from Seattle coaches. So in terms of demanding presence from his quarterbacks and what it looks like to him, it was all of his kind of coach speak stuff, like having the ability to take control of a huddle, a practice out there, owning the moment, moving quickly, communicating, have confidence in the scheme, working really hard, understand things, all that type of stuff. But then he said, I think certainly Geno, when you're out there with him, you can feel his presence. And he does a really good job of that, of commanding the attention of his teammates. And I think even since our time here, I think Sam Howell has really grown in that regard. So,
yeah,
obviously Geno is going to be ahead in that aspect, but good that, that's showing up with a new system. And Gino does have that advantage of this ain't the first time he's had to learn a new offense. Like, he's been in and around a lot of different offenses league wide.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Gino stuff continued because he was asked about characterizing his offense and how it fit Geno Smith. And so he said, I think that there is a really good marriage there with some of the skill set that Geno has. I think that we ask our quarterback to do a lot. Luckily for us, Geno's really athletic as well. I think for us, we don't have to limit it to just the drop back. I think he's really good in the play action game as well, which will be a big part of our offense. And I think for us, it's not just the 5-step all the time, which is what we were speaking about. But I do think that Geno is really good at getting the ball out on time and very efficient with the football, which he obviously showed in 2022. Led the league in completion percentage. I think that's something that marriage, understanding how to get the ball out on time and really take care of the football, is something that works really well. Because Geno said about it being a drop back offense, I think people kind of, there's going to be a whole lot of it to this offense, and you can only do so much of drop back, the 5-step drop stuff, which Grubb speaks about before you have to do a different bucket and lean into a different thing, or you experience diminishing returns. You have to have a bit of variety.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's cool that he mentioned that, just because it's, even though it's such a basic thing, you rarely hear a coach say like 5-step drop. You don't hear that often. It is a huge part of the offense. I think, again, though, in the NFL, he's going to run even more stuff than he did anywhere previously in that area, in that arena. The 5-step, the pure drops with no play action, no RPO, no screens. Very curious to see what he majors in there. Of course, a lot of it will overlap with what he did at UW, but what more will he add is the question there.
And finally, on Geno, Grubb was asked how far he went back on Geno's in terms of his film, and he said how he went back to college to look at how his game has grown. What did he do well? What does he struggle with? And he described how it's really cool when you see a sample size like Geno and the evolution of him and his career, and just how serious he is about everything and ability to be coached and looking for his own blind spots. I think I went all the way back when I thought about some concepts and things like that. What did he do in college? How did he grow as he went through the league? And yeah, like I said, it's really impressive just to see the type of growth he's had. So,
yeah, Geno,
that West Virginia offense, spread concepts are spread concepts, right?
Oh, definitely.
Some of the Geno stuff you can see Grubb tapping into.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the empty stuff in particular definitely will translate. I think Grubb's simply going to keep the empty package the same, almost just call it what he calls it, of which, again, there's plenty of overlap with what UW did out of empty already. So, but clearly he excels in that. Keeping empty balanced, though, the way you do that is by making sure you run empty with a running back aligned out wide, right? So you can shift in and out of it. And he loves shifting. So I don't know. I'm curious if they decide to shift to empty more than we would even think. Just because it's like a weapon to take advantage of, because Geno's so good at it.
Yeah, and skill set wise, in theory, Noah Fant is comfortable being split out wide. He doesn't, he's almost better being split out and not attached to the formation, not as a tight end, but as a detached 3 or even in the slot. That's kind of better for him.
Yeah,
they have guys who can move around a bit and be out in space a bit more. If anything, the questions is kind of, do you do that out of only 11 personnel, or are you good enough to, who's your second tight end who can give you the 12 personnel ability to do that?
The question is protection, right? So the reason why he would flex to empty out of 12 personnel last year is because you're in 12 and you have run heavy tendency. The D-line is going to be beefier and thus not as good rushing the passer. So then you can flex out Colby and Fant and still get kind of, pass-friendly concepts in there and help your O-line out a little bit. So, excuse me. So they're going to be 11 personnel heavy, like big time this year, because they have to get, as part of why Jackson didn't have as much production as some people wanted is because, well, one, he's a rookie, but secondly, the 11 personnel package is competing with the 12 personnel package, which was extremely good the previous season and still remained good. It's just, they had to meet in the middle a little bit. So I don't know. There's some variables there that I didn't think about, but yeah. 12 personnel is relying on, or empties relying on 12 personnel because it's relying on better pass protection. So one way to solve that problem, if you want to call it a problem, is just, can the O-line just improve? And then you can be an empty whenever you want. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be nice. But yeah, also 12 personnel, you're more likely to get base, so you're more likely to get a friendlier matchup for your receiver, and you're also more likely to get more predictable coverage, and a less coverage potential, like less types of coverage. So you mentioned running backs in empty. Grubb, right at the end, was asked by Brady Henderson of ESPN about his philosophy on getting running backs involved in the passing game. That is in itself, asking that question is something we can explore. But Grubb responded, I love doing that. I love doing that. Yeah, we want to make every guy on the field, all 5 of them, as dangerous as possible from any position on the field. So, Griff, what are your thoughts on running back targets in the passing game?
They're a tool, right? Well, one, they're not something that you always necessarily set out to do. They're in the pattern, and they're often a check down, right?
Mm-hmm. Because they're from the backfield,
right?
Most
so
of the time.
A lot of it's just going to be a function of what the defense is doing and how the quarterback is reading the play out. And the other part of it is, of course, running back screens, which every team should have a running back screen package, right? Just why wouldn't you? Then the other stuff is if you have a running back that can actually run some routes, like choice routes or angle routes, or some fades
Alvin
on
Kamara, Christian McCaffrey,
right? Jahmyr Gibbs. In theory, Walker has the traits for that. So do you want to get him involved there? Grubb didn't use that. Said, despite what Grubb said, he didn't really use running backs in the passing game that much at UW. But again, because he didn't need to.
Well, and the other factor to this is a lot. What is your pass pro? Because if your pass pro is requiring the back to stay in, then you're only ever going to get the ball to him as a check down where he could be chip and releasing or check and releasing. But he's not the primary guy. Ultimately, I think it comes down to, and Brady Henderson did tweet out that Seattle essentially was, bottom 5 in running back targets for the part since 2011, regardless of the coordinator. But Seattle has never had that type of running back who is worthy of being the primary target on stuff other than running back screens. Like they don't, where if you're releasing him out of the backfield, then he becomes the hot guy. When they've wanted to do stuff like that, they've just put Tyler Lockett in the backfield. Whoa. That is exciting. Tyler Lockett in the backfield is very exciting. I agree. And Walker in his first 2 seasons, he's had to learn the pass pro stuff. He's had to learn the pass pro rules. And I think last season Charbonnet went through that too. So they just they never quite had the ability. I do agree with what you said, Griff, about Walker in theory has the skill set. Charbonnet has some good hands. But in terms of learning the route running and the craft for that, they just haven't they haven't done it yet. This could be the year that it happens, but I would be I don't it would somewhat surprise me. I don't. It seems like a very off-season topic, but
yeah. And looking at the Huskies' running back room, they had 360 yards receiving between all 5 of them. So it's ultimately like no.
Yeah, and what stands out to me when you mention like a Dylan Johnson, what stood out to me about him was his pass pro.
Yep.
For college, like his pass pro is pretty damn solid.
Indeed. Yeah, if the protection is really bad, it's not just going to leak into the running backs. The tight ends will have to chip release a lot, and that will reduce them into being check down targets too. They just paid Noah Fant. I mean, they paid Noah Fant enough to where are they going to feel urged to not use him that way? I mean, it's going to be a little awkward if the O-line, under the condition that the O-line doesn't play well again, which is a possibility. I'm pretty bullish on them. I think they can improve. My dog is locked in right now. Brady, get down. You looked at me. Anyway, if the O-line doesn't improve, Noah Fant might be a glorified chip blocker and like another dot of like 4 or 5 yards.
That sounds awful.
That doesn't sound great for a guy that you just spent $10 million on.
And who's not great, like, at line of scrimmage stuff.
No. I mean, it's... If that happens, the irony is going to be like, you could have just paid Damian Lewis to be an actual blocker, and then you can do even more, open up the offense. So, I don't know. It's all too theoretical at this point.
Yeah. So, finally, from what I've got here is that Leslie Frazier, again, was mentioned as someone who's helping out Grubb. And when he was interviewed, apparently it came up about proving his offensive success can translate to the NFL. And Grubb kind of elaborated on saying, I've always felt like the next step, I was really anxious and excited to prove myself. I feel like every step I take, I just get more excited, more motivated and determined to make sure that we succeed. It's a lot of fun. I'm excited to show we can do it on the biggest stage. And he mentioned how they haven't had to punt yet in OTAs. This was OTA 7, which I don't know if that was a joke because they might not actually be doing like a full, they have a versus period, but I don't know actually if they're doing a full game like situation yet. Probably not. It may have been a joke, but the comments coming out about the offense, about the newness of it. I heard Reek Woolen on the radio with Stacy and Bumpus. Is that the show? Yeah. Stacy and Bump. That's right. Bump and Stacy. There you go. Reek Woolen saying that they're doing stuff, and there was a soft implication that there was more it was a bit more complicated with more going on than last season. Yeah. And then the final thing was Grubb was asked about pressure on the staff. And in that kind of long answer where he's saying that he doesn't want to be pressing and all that type of stuff, and you don't want to be out of your comfort zone like that, he mentioned you got to figure out ways for our tight ends to catch stick routes, and we got to find ways for our guards to block better on inside zone. Now, those are two very, just generic examples. However, it suggests that on the agenda was stick routes that day. Same day that reporters reported Tyrese Knight having a pass break up on an out pattern, which that could be a stick route on a tight end. If you're a quarter flat player especially, you'd get matched up with that type of route, or you could be in man coverage. And then the inside zone thing cropping up again, which I think it's more confirmation that inside zone, tight zone is going to be their bread and butter run play.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else on Grubb, Griff?
He did mention play action. UW used a lot of play action, but if you eliminate RPOs, they actually use less than Seattle. Most play action percentages are calculated with pass attempts being the denominator. But I think it makes more sense to look at total snaps as the denominator, because and especially early downs. And the reason for that is, let's just use most offenses have around 1,000 snaps, but if you just look at early downs, it's going to be more like 750. But just to make it easier to communicate. Just pretend that if an entire offense's early down snaps is like 1,000 snaps, if two separate teams have, say, 200 play action pass attempts each, but one team passes more, the team that passes more in general is going to have a lower play action percentage because it's taking it by percent of total dropbacks, right? But if you take it by percent of total offensive snaps, both offenses are using play action the identical amount. So those numbers, I think, are completely skewed and flawed that are out there that you can find online, because it's really a function of how much a team play actions, but also secondly, how much a team passes in general, which is going to get you that number. So I think it's the more demonstrative number is to look at play action attempts by percent of total early down snaps. And looking through that lens, Grubb used play action on his early down snaps 15% of the time. That's without RPOs. And Seattle was 20%, which would have led the league. So Seattle is like already doing the past 2 years like an extraordinary amount of play action. And Grubb 15% is a high number that would have ranked top 10, but it's just Seattle was even higher. Which again is pointing to the fact that Pete Carroll actually gets it. He actually understands that you don't need to run to set up play action, despite what he says to the media, because actions speak louder than words when it comes to conveying, what you think about football. Anyway, so now if he RPOs a lot, that number will be higher, but I really think you should separate play action and RPOs because the pass attempts and RPOs are very low. I mean, they're not that beneficial. They're the whole point of an RPO is that the pass part of RPO, run pass option, is better than the run part. It's not competing with, other parts of your pass game except for maybe quick game, which isn't that lucrative either. Anyway,
there you go.
Thoughts?
No, yep. Pretty much aligned. So finally, Jay Harbaugh, the special teams coordinator, was up, and he was asked a lot about, understandably, the new kickoff rules. And I mean, it's all kind of stuff with, you'd expect him to say, but it was cool to hear it. And he spoke a lot again. So he said how he anticipates seeing about 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of pretty rapid change, and anyone that has an advantage early with what scheme they're running on kickoff will probably be able to keep up that advantage for a little while until the people catch up. And he was keeping some stuff close to his chest because obviously no one actually knows what it's going to look like. And I'm intrigued on, obviously in preseason you have to practice and you have to get guys good looks on the kickoff, but you also need to see if your stuff works. But if you've got a really good idea, you probably want to not run that in the preseason. So, yeah. I'm going to be watching special teams tape for the first time in a while, I think. He also was asked if he anticipates a lot of squib-type kicks this season. The reason being that once the ball hits the ground, then people it initiates the process, right?
Right.
So he said, I think so. I think that's the general consensus, is you're not rewarded for hang time anymore. So any ball that can hit, it kind of creates artificial hang time. If it can hit the ground, the action's going to start. I think that the rules are incentivizing that type of behavior, so I'd imagine that's what you'll get. I wonder, Griff, if we see maybe Michael Dixon taking these kickoffs, given his leg ability, and
Think so?
I don't know. I think you could do some cool things with him compared to Myers, but I have no idea.
I think no. That I hope that's something they play with.
Now the other thing is, Harbaugh spoke about the skill sets of players involved on each side. He said we've thought about that a lot. You've taken away the bulk of the running play, so maybe the player that now becomes more available that wasn't would be the guy that just didn't quite have the ideal top end speed, but has the arm length and the physicality and the decision making as a defensive player. Maybe you see more tight ends, more pass rushers, bigger bodies, more linemen on the field in that sense. It's a great thing. You have more flexibility within the roster for guys to be able to get involved. And you also may see more players that are starters or fringe starters because they're not having to get up to 20, 21, 22 miles an hour now. So it's maybe not as taxing. So that's interesting. And also, the whole point of these rules is to reduce the injury rate. So maybe it's like a safer thing to put your starters into.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they also spoke about considering replacing the kicker with another special teams player. Of course, the Kansas City's considering Justin Reed doing it because he has some kickability and is a defensive player. And there's a stat that 40% of XFL staff had the kicker getting involved on the tackle. Sounds crazy. They said they considered it, but there's a risk-reward thing to it, so we'll have to see. Anything else on Harbaugh, Griff?
I find it interesting that he doubles Grubb and Durde's run time on his interview. Yeah, I mean, you get the vibes of future head coach from him?
I don't know, man. Maybe, but I also, maybe. And he comes from that type of background. But I also think he got asked more questions.
Right. Why does he get so many questions?
Because everyone can ask so many things about the new kickoff. But people aren't going to ask about, hey, how do you find the two gapping style here? Yeah. How does that compare with your thing?
Yeah. True.
Like, who had the shortest interview? Aden Durde, because he doesn't get actually asked any real defensive questions.
Yeah, right. Is he even allowed to? Because it's not. He's like a security guard for the defense.
He's a DC.
No, he's Griff, a real DC. He's a real DC.
Chat. We'll be back next Tuesday probably with well, we need to come up with some stuff. We can have another OTA recap. There'll be some off-season news, I'm sure. We have a topic on DK Metcalf and the future of him, obviously, with receivers getting paid left, right, and center, and whether DK is worth it. We have free agents tape to go over. We're going to cover the top free agent signings of Seattle's off-season and a game of theirs and break down kind of what they're going to bring to the Seahawks. And we also have Ryan Grubb tape to look at. We could maybe look at another Mike McDonald game. Now we're even more familiar with the system, etc., etc. So we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining us live. Appreciate it. Please follow Griff at CMike's Spin Move. Follow me at Matty F. Brown. Follow the pod at Seattle Overload to know when we're next going live. And if you want to support the show financially, there's a donation link in the YouTube description, a Stripe link. We split that between us. And please also give us a 5-star review if you're listening. Or even if you're not listening, give us a 5-star review, share it with a friend, comment what you want to see from us next. You have the power to pick the next episode. So take advantage of that. Griff, closing wisdom?
No.